All right, I think that's live now. So I thought I'd just come on and read out the comments from the 8L35 video because it got quite a lot and very lively responses on both sides of the fence, whether it was good or not. I think the microphone is okay here. About 0 people will be watching, so I won't get any feedback if it's any good. So I'm just going to bring up the video, and we'll probably start at the top or something. Sorry, my chair's broken and it's not the best chair to sit in. Okay, so starting at the top, we've got the user Get Your Pingu Out, who comments, fantastic content, this was great. I'm curious, is there a specific watch brand you like because the movement or build quality? Interested to know. I responded with not specifically. All brands make stupid design decisions. Seiko tends to make relatively few of them for the most part. And about half the range is value for money. And the reason I say that about half the range is value for money is because in the past few years, Seiko have put their prices up considerably. So that makes some of their range no longer good value for money, particularly in the mid-range with the 6R movements and the 4R movements. I mean, they used to go for considerably less, and now you're looking at 6R movements or 6R watches for $1,500, which was never the case previously. I mean, they were up in the region of $700 to $800, and now they're just absurdly expensive. My opinion on the 6R movement is that it's really just a supercharged 7S26. So you have to be pretty realistic when you're comparing what they actually are. So the only difference between that and a 4R36 essentially is that it uses a different mainspring. And I think someone might correct me here. I think it's got a different hairspring as well. So they're made out of a different alloy. The change in the alloy gives you more runtime, but that's really the only difference. So whether that's worth several $100s more is really up to the buyer. I'd say maybe it isn't, but hey, whatever gets you going. As opposed to other brands, I mean, a lot of brands use a derivative of the ETA 2824 movement. So that's what the Solita is as well. So the Solita's the SW200 is a 2824 by a different name. So, you're looking at that, and you're looking at a movement that was designed really in the 1950s. It's had some updates along the way, but essentially it's the same thing it was in the 1950s. So again, you've got to sort of ask yourself, what are you getting for your money there? And you see some of these smaller brands or big brands come out with a movement that's essentially a 2824, and they're going for come out with a watch that's essentially got a 2824 in it, and they're going for thousands. And the question that you have to ask yourself is there enough transformative difference or point of difference on the movement of the watch to justify that? And in some cases, I'm sure there are. In some cases, I'm sure there isn't. So that would be the question that I would be asking if you're looking at the value for money question. As for quality, well, as we're aware, pretty much all the Seikos that aren't Grand Seiko are made by a machine. The machines do a relatively good job, but where they really fall down on is oiling. So I'm just going to jack this chair up a bit more. Hang on. Now they say the camera adds 10 pounds, and I think it's at least adding 20 here. The machines do a fairly good job of oiling for the most part, but they do tend to over oil the movements, and it's the same with the Sellita movements. The Seiko robots seem to spray oil everywhere. So my oiling by hand is dramatically better than what the Seiko robots can achieve. In fact, quite often, or in some watches, that the oiling can be so bad that the oil's just all over the pallet fork, it's all through the balance, and the watch just doesn't run. So, but I've heard that as well, coming from the Sellita movements, and I don't really see a lot of them. But the last one I had through here had some construction or some assembly issues, and all through the Careless Works there was brass shards. So you got to sort of ask yourself, is that worth servicing, or do we just stick another SW200 in? And in this case, it was cheaper just to put another movement in than to service it. So I think that plays into the value for money question as well. And particularly with the 7S26 and 4R36 based movements, I don't recommend that people get them serviced. We just replace the movement and keep doing that. I do occasionally get people that say, no, I want the better oiling, but yeah, typically it's better value for money just to swap the movement out. Just coming back to the question again as well about design decisions. The 7S26 is a reasonably good movement, and all its derivatives and grandchildren and whatever else. One of the design issues that I think it has is, while it's a very good layout, it is hard to get the top train jewels to oil them properly. And particularly in the case of the 7S26 and its earlier cousins, so we're talking the 7002, 7006, 7009, and all of those, they do tend to excessively wear at the pawl wheel on the auto one. I'll just get one actually and show you where that is. So we'll just point that out. So you see, okay, so you see that guy there? Now they didn't bush those or put any bearing of any type on them. So literally all they are is there a hole through on that pawl wheel, which is critical to the auto wind mechanism. They don't have any bush, no jewels, nothing. It's just a hole in the pinion, and the pinion just goes onto a little spigot and then is screwed down. But because those are just about constantly winding because of the way that the automatic system works, they just get chewed out. So I often see them with anywhere up to 0.5 mil slop on the wheel. So I've got a stack of them here and probably replace them more than, well, probably about half the time when I service one of those movements or its derivatives. And it's the same deal on the 7 Series chronos. So the 7015, 7016, 7018, and so on, all have the same issue. So the good news is that the pawl wheels are still available new from Seiko, and you can pull them in from a 7S26. So I'm constantly swapping those over. with the ETA movements, I'm just going to reference the SW200 and the 2824 here specifically because they're the most common type of movement that you'll see. What goes on those is the reversing wheels. So they don't have a pull wheel, they have double reversing wheels. So the reversing wheel will break and then they won't wind. Seikos, at least because of the way they're constructed, will keep winding. You just lose a little bit of efficiency, but they still will wind the watch and the watch will still run. Another thing with the Seikos is because they've got a fairly simple gear train in the 7S26, they could not be serviced for 40 years and still run. The ETA movement's got quite fine tolerances. So when they get dry, they stop, and then you have to get it serviced. The 7S26 and the Seiko movements, you sort of have to ask yourself, well, they were designed to be made on 1960s CNC machines, so they've got quite sloppy tolerances in them. They can dry up, not be oiled, and they'll run for just about ever because of that. So, in fact, when I rebuild them, the sloppier they are, the better amplitude I get. So figure that one out. But that's just how they're made. So we could probably go into that in more depth another time. I've got more of these to answer. So Mercy Shot 83 says, wearing it in my SLA 043 for a couple of months, runs like a dream. What I particularly like about it is it's stable in every position, plus 2 seconds a day. Greetings and thanks for the good review. And my answer was, yep, great to hear. They do run really well, this movement, so in all positions. So I definitely haven't got that as a criticism. The only criticism I do have of the divers, though, is that their crowns are incredibly fragile. So the crown itself is basically the same crown that's used in the 7S26. The diver, that is the SKX007. The way they're designed, actually you can see it on this one here. If I can get out of shot. So you can see there, they're made as an assembly. Come on. So there we go. So they're made as an assembly. That whole thing is crimped into the crown. So, and you'll see there, you might just be able to see that the stem's actually thinner just as it comes out of the crown. Have a guess where it breaks. If you guess where it just comes out of the crown because it's thinner there, I'll give you $1. I won't, but you've won $1. So what will happen, the same thing will happen with the 8L35 divers. So that's the SBDX 001, 017 or any of their derivatives. They always break there. They're the same stupid construction. And unfortunately, Seiko didn't make them just with a thread in the end of the crown so that you can replace the stem, which would make sense, but they've chosen not to. So if you're using those, make sure that well, if you have one, just make sure that the seals are good and you're incredibly careful with the crown. All right. The next one is from Jenny Locke, and she says she filed down a cheap screwdriver to remove the micro Phillips screw on the dial plate of the 7S26. That's a common thing to do. I ended up buying one of the miniature screwdrivers. They were absurdly expensive, like 30 US or something. But before that, that's what I did. I just filed down a flathead screwdriver. I bought quite a few sets of screwdrivers in the search for one that worked. They didn't, so I made up my own, which worked fine. I'm just a hobbyist, so the 7S26 and other like movements are fine and cheap to play with. The most complex Seiko I've worked on, I think, was a 5606, and by complex, I mean it had too many pingers, springs that go jump, and yep, they do have plenty in there. Not as much as some watches, but you've also got, in those ones, you've got diafix settings, and on the calendar side, there's a few shepherd's crook springs and some other bits as well. But But I've done a few Swiss ones, my favorite being a 1966 Omega Constellation, which was beautiful to work on. Probably use the 500 series movement, which is beautiful to work on. I enjoyed this video. Nice to hear an Aussie voice for a change. And then I responded that the 56 is pretty nice, but I get me men on the pingers. Best way to stop that is to just bog one of the sides of the spring down with some Roleco and then just flick it out with your tweezers, and it's literally got nowhere to go. All right. Braunschweig and Marty says, love it. Perfect content, good quality video and explanations to the video. Perfect. I wouldn't take a word away. Congrats. Thank you. Then we've got Dennis Deschamps. I love your videos because you simply don't get to see anything close to them elsewhere, especially this 8L35 deconstruct. Thank you. Let's keep going. I actually answered that, but I'll get into the answer further on relating to some other questions. So great video. After seeing your explanation of this 8L35 movement, I started wearing my MM300 again. Great. And I covered the thing with the crown there with it as well. Okay, so 8L35B movement is pretty different from the 8L35 movement in regards to decoration, and I agree. They use the Geneva stripes, or in this case, Coque de Japon. I probably haven't pronounced that very well, but yeah, they are better decorated than the only ones. Now, Mark Urban says, lighting is great. Is that center wheel hole jeweled? And he said, watching when you remove the calendar side, I can see there is no jewel. John Hayes says, great common sense explanations on this movement. Cheers, John. And then I had an answer, which I'll go into shortly. I'm not, I'll do my best to pronounce this one. So I think it's a Turkish name. Timazin Boyeskalip. I probably got that wrong. So he says, for the price range, this movement is a gem. Japanese movements from Seiko are very good. My answer to that was not really. They're overpriced for what they are these days. They used to be better value for money. So, for example, the SBDX 001 and 017, they used to go for, gee, I think you used to be able to buy them new for in those divers for, gee, I think they were about 1,800 or something. So they weren't absurdly expensive. And then when Seiko sort of started to go up market more, the price like doubled. So they used to be reasonably priced, and now not so much. Then in addition to that, you've got the other problem, which is that you can't get them serviced by anyone. You have to send them back to Seiko. So if you look at the total cost of ownership of the watch over the life of the watch, you're really coming out well behind, because you're going to have to send it back and forth from Seiko every few years to get it serviced, or every 5 years or whatever. So that is something that you should factor in. And the other thing you should factor in as well is, if you're buying secondhand, you pretty much need to factor in a service as well, because the chances that it's been serviced are usually nil. And it's best to get that done, because otherwise they just run like crap. All right, so Jaspal Dillon says, so what do you think of the 8L35 movement in comparison to the 4R and 6R movements? Is it worth the premium? Now, I think I did answer that. So I said basically, I said probably. The 7000 series and derivatives are okay, but they are what they are. They're designed to be a no-fuss movement with as few components as possible. The 8L is more like the 56 series, and that's probably the best comparison that I could make, as in it has a different design philosophy. Probably 56 and 52 you could compare it to. I don't think it would be fair to compare the 7 series movement to the 8L, because they're constructed completely differently and they have different design goals entirely. So it's sort of like saying, well, I'm going to compare this Ferrari to a Toyota Camry. That's probably the closest analogy that I can use. Maybe not Ferrari, we'll say BMW. Okay, so it'd be like comparing say a BMW 5 Series or something to a Toyota Camry, and it's not a fair comparison because the goal and the mission of the Camry is to drive forever and get you from A to B and not have issues. And if it does have issues, they're fairly cheap to fix, whereas the BMW has a completely different mission, goal, construction, whatever. So ultimately, the Seiko 7 Series derivatives are not designed to be chronometer grade movements, while the 8L is. So that's really where the Alpha and the Omega are the whole discussion. Okay, so Just Watches says, thank you. Very interesting teardown. I'm unfamiliar with the function of the rocker with the 5 gears on the bottom. It's a much fancier version of the floating nylon gear used in the 7S26 to change the day and the date. And I said, pretty much, it's basically a complex setting lever that handles all of the functions. So on the 7 Series and derivatives, the setting is done train side by a few components and the rest calendar side by a few more. And if you pull one apart, you'll see that they're pretty obvious. As for what's better, neither really. They both achieve a goal. They just take different approaches to it. The complex lever is more difficult to make, so if you're pulling it apart, it's more of a premium feel over the plastic parts on the 7S26, because all those little gears need to be machined, and then it's got to be pressed together and whatnot, whereas the plastic gears, you can spit them out by the millions out of a mold. So that's where the difference is on those. So CLO27 says, love the video, thanks for sharing. Watches with the 8L35 are at least 2 grand, but you don't seem impressed with the movement. What brand-specific movements do you like because of a nice movement or build quality? And I'm just going to sort of bring it back to the 8L35 at the moment. So the movement's okay, but my main disappointment is with it that Seiko insists it's too difficult for a standard watchmaker to service and it needs to be sent to Japan, which is just total bullshit. It's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. It really isn't a complex movement, and just about anyone, it's no more. In fact, I think from memory, and it's been a while since I shot that video, the part count was actually lower than a 6R15, so or about the same. So I just don't understand what is so difficult about it. And this comes back to one of the problems I have, and a lot of people have with watch manufacturers limiting spare parts and really trying to corner the spare parts and service market. Is complete bullshit. And I've done 2 submissions. We're actually doing a right to repair inquiry in Australia, and I put in 2 submissions to that, which you can read on the Australian Productivity Council. I can't remember. Productivity Commission. That's right. Website. And I managed to get a bunch of other watchmakers to put in some submissions as well. So considering the size of the watch market in Australia, which is reasonably small, we were totally overrepresented in like 10% of the responses to the inquiry were specifically from the watch market. So we did actually have a fairly good result from that. So the outcome of the report, which if you're in Australia, is pretty relevant, or even if you're in the US and following it, it's an interesting outcome. The outcome from the report is, in a nutshell, I'll try and tie it down to 3 or 4 sentences, but the Productivity Commission has identified that there is a problem with spare parts access in Australia, and they did mention that the watch market, while generally watches misbehaving or not being able to be repaired don't kill people, the effect to consumers is quite large, because you're buying a luxury product that can be many thousands of dollars, and then you can't get the darn thing repaired here or spare parts for it, which is complete bullshit. So they've recommended that the ACCC, which is our version of the Better Business Bureau or whatever in the US, investigate specifically the watch market and just find out what's going on, and whether if the report comes out positive, they may actually take legal action against the manufacturers that are sort of behaving in this way, which should be a fantastic outcome. So I'm just going on back to my response there from a small digression, although an important one in my opinion. For this reason, they don't supply parts, special tools, or technical information. And you'll see on my video, I actually had to make a special tool just to get the rotor off. So they don't supply any technical information, nothing. There's no oiling guide or anything like that for this movement. Something's busted, you can't get parts for it. It's just a disaster. So I've said there, so that makes it arguably unrepairable. And in my opinion, I think that ties into the value proposition on these watches as well. I mean, if you can't get it fixed wherever you want to get it fixed, what does that do to the resale value of these things? And in my opinion, I think it reduces it. So just going on with my response, it's not some mythical, amazing movement like Seiko would have you think it is. It's fairly well designed. It's in a good size package, it's reasonably thin. It's nice, but it's important just not let the emotion of it make it more than it actually is. So, like I've said, it's equivalent roughly to the 56 and 52 series from yesteryear. So I've got another response there just on that topic from Yunlong Wu, who says, I was told it was better than the Rolex 3135, 3235 and the Omega 8900. No, it's not. It's a workman grade movement. They don't have a free sprung balance, which is what most high-end movements have these days. If you really want to get into the nitty-gritty of it, they don't use, although I sort of argue this is a positive rather than a negative. So they don't use any exotic materials that need special handling, which is a good thing, but it can also be seen as a negative because generally the movements that do have exotic materials or finishes or whatever these days get better performance. My opinion is I think that the Rolex balances are superior. Reason being that they're free sprung, which means that the spring actually does stay flat. The hairspring stays flat specifically. So on the 8L35, they still use a flat hairspring, which will, when the balance swings, the hairspring will bend a little bit up and down. So with a free sprung balance or a Brego balance, the hairspring does stay flat just because of the way they're designed. My opinion is as well, I think that the Rolex Microstellar regulating system is better than regulator arms because regulator arms do drift over time. But the Microstellar balance, you can look it up on the internet. I'm not going to bring up a picture. It has screws around the balance, and that, excuse me, is how you adjust the loss and gain on the balance. So you don't have regulator arms, you just have a little tool that goes on these screws and you turn it slightly to adjust it. And I think that's a superior system because it's much less prone to drift. As for the finish on the Rolex movements, well, I mean, I've even had a look at the 8L35B. The finish is not comparable. So the finish on the Rolex and the Omega 8900 is much better. The person after me, Daniel D, said the same thing. 31, 35, 32, 35 is much better. Free sprung is about superior to regulator balance. Absolutely. Seiko have just started to look into free sprung balances. Was it the they released a high-tech movement recently, the 9R series. So the 9R series, as far as I'm aware, is the first production watch from Seiko that has a free sprung balance. And it also has, excuse me, they've basically done what Rolex did with their balance. So it's adjusted by screws on the balance wheel for loss gain, which is smart. I think that's a good decision. So just keep going down here. So the response to Daniel D says by Yudlong Wu, is by your logic, the Tissot Powermatic 80 is better than the 8L, right? Has longer balance, reserve, free sprung design, and silicon hairspring. Please stop bullshitting. You are a bullshitter. What can I say? JC is the next response. How about your local Seiko service center? Nope, they do not service the 8L series. They'll take them off you and then they'll send them to Japan. They do not touch them in country. So it's the same with the US as it is here. So as I've responded to JC, they've said they don't service them or carry parts. They ship them to Japan. Okay, so Rocco R has responded with, wow, the modern 8L35s look so much better than these older variants. Definitely. I guess that's why they jacked the price up on them. But as I've said before, you still can't get them fixed locally. So is it value for money? You know the answer. Well, it's a personal decision, really. So Mike G says, how do you remove the movement from a Seiko Marine Master 300 with the monocoque case? I want to regulate it because it's now running minus 13 seconds a day after a slight drop to the floor. And this comes back to my criticism on regulator arms. A drop will knock a regulator arm off kilter. And then all of a sudden you've got that problem. So that's why, in my opinion, I think the free sprung balances are better. Now, that's not to say that I think every watch that comes through here with regulator arms on it is crap. It's not. I just think in an ideal world, if you're looking for the best performance and you're aiming for, 10 out of 10 on everything, I think free sprung balance is the answer. So I've responded with Mike G with bezel will need to come off. Then you need to remove the crystal assembly sandwich. So these watches, once you've taken the bezel off, they have they've got two more bezels in there. So they've got a large bezel which screws into the case, and then another bezel which screws a crystal into that bezel. So that's why I've called it the crystal assembly sandwich, because it all kind of goes together, and you can just take that sandwich off and get in there. And yeah, I mean, unless you got all the right tools, I wouldn't touch it. The chance that you can damage something is just like really high. So I'd just pay someone to do it unless you've got all the tools and the confidence to do that. So once you've got that crystal assembly sandwich off, there's a little tab next to where the crown goes, and you press that down, take the crown out, and then the movement comes out. But then you have to regulate it on the bench. So it's just a shitty job to do. I think, like I said, unless you've got the confidence and the tools to do it, don't touch it. So another response there. This was 11 hours ago. Yunlong Wu, the guy from before. So he says, I know the Seiko 8L 9S55 65 variant is better than the Rolex 3135. It's bullshit. It isn't. But how does this movement compare with Rolex's newest 3235 or Omega 8900? To be honest, I'll just have a quick look because I don't know what they look like. I don't get any new Rolex in here at all. Everything I have here is old. So looking at the 3235, I mean, that's got a silicon hairspring on it. It's going to be a better movement. Again, free sprung balance. Finish looks fantastic. There's videos on YouTube pulling these apart, but I think it's miles ahead of the 8L35. And this comes down to what I've said before about they're designed for a purpose, and the 8L35 movement's like 20 years old or something now. So comparing it to a recently designed movement is kind of disingenuous. Times have changed since 20 years ago, so people want different things out of these watches. They want, they're looking for different balance setups and stuff like that. And that's what people want. So having a look at the Omega 8900, so you've got the coaxial escapement, and that's got 2 barrels. So again, you just really can't compare it. It's a movement. What the Omega is trying to achieve and what the 8L35 is trying to achieve are completely different. So making a direct comparison is kind of stupid. 8900 again, difficult to get serviced. You have to take it back to Omega. Most people won't touch it. So finish is just way better than the 8L35. So there's really no comparison. Okay, so our next comment is from Green Eric, and he says, what do you think of the new Seiko movements, such as high beats with 80 hours power reserve and the spring drive of 5 days reserve? I said I haven't had one apart and probably never will, again, because Seiko refused to supply parts for these and insist you send them back to Japan if there's a problem. It's a stupid policy. And Green Eric says Rolex probably do the same, and they definitely do. So while they have some similar, well, yeah, they both do the same thing. So they're in-house design movements, and on the higher end movements, they just demand they're sent back to the manufacturer for repair, which is just stupid bullshit. So while these movements, they all look very nice on paper, serviceability is nil. So where really does that leave the value for money? I think it leaves it in a pretty shitty position. Jay Lee says, awesome video, thanks. Ticking Watch says, a really good looking movement, good video. I said, I know, right? Monad Mercedes says, I live in the Middle East and have no Seiko service center, so it's scary to buy a Seiko with the high price tag. My eyes was more for a Seiko reissue using 6L35, and yeah, absolutely. If you're nowhere where there is a Seiko service center, gee, that's a pretty scary prospect. I mean, you can send it back to Seiko directly, but then the cost is on you for the freight. So again, this comes back to a stupid policy decision. AC 99515AK says, so the 8L35 is not really an 9S derivative. Everyone make it look like the 8L is a superb movement. And I responded with, no, the 9S is the derivative of the 8L. It's an okay movement, well designed and a good size package, but it's nothing mythical. Would be nice if Seiko supplied parts for it to normal repairers. The 9S has a reverser wheel instead of the pull wheel for winding, which is a good decision. I actually have another 8L35 here, which I think has the same problem. So as the one that was in the video, which is that on the pull wheel, the pinion or the axle, whatever you want to call it, is actually detached from the wheel, so it doesn't wind. So going to a reverser wheel, excuse me, benefits of the reverser wheel is that they're smoother for winding. Downside is that they do need service more often than the pull wheel or magic fingers, whatever you want to call it, system. So Ink Howard, I don't know how you say that. It has the same architecture, I think, though the 9SA5 is more involved when it comes to finishing with things like cleanliness of parts, rhodium plating, Tokyo stripes, perlage, and the 6-position adjustment. So the 8L35 bog standard, I don't think is adjusted. So the Grand Seiko level stuff is both to positionally and also for temperature. Joe Smolensky says, this is hilarious, just a monothon from start to finish. I said, you're welcome for the free entertainment. Obviously, he didn't get the points that I made, that the value for money prospect is, to be quite honest, all fucked up, because you can't get them serviced locally, which is a big problem. And secondly, they're not this sort of mythical movement that keeps perfect time. It just simply doesn't happen. Just coming up in the comments here, I've got Joseph Falk, who says, I just purchased an SLA 23J1 with an 8L35. When do you recommend it should be serviced in the future? I know you work on vintage watches, but are you able to service it? Thanks for your time. So I think these are 5 to 7 years. That's about the average for these sorts of movements. So I can work on it, but if anything's broken, all bets are off. I can't get the parts, and I'll have to tell you to send it to Seiko. Patrick O says, thank you for making this video. It's very informative. I'm disappointed that Seiko failed to use a better crown system for the 8L35. You and the thousands of other people have had to replace one. Also, I don't like that you can't get it serviced anywhere. Yeah, it's bullshit. Why they insist on that policy is it's fairly transparent. I mean, they just want to sort of corner the market on the labor as well. So they want to control they're trying to do what the Swiss do, the Swiss model, which is what Rolex and Omega and those other bastards do, which is they want to control the life of the watch from the cradle to the grave. So they want you to purchase it, send it back to them for service, so they skim off you a second time, and then you continue getting it serviced there, and they keep skimming off you. I mean, it's a horrendous model, and that's why I think value for money wise, they really need the middle finger. All right, just coming back to the comments on the original video here. So Chris Panagopoulos, which I actually, long story short, I did Greek school when I was a kid, so I should be better at reading these, but it was a long time ago. Good day. Happy to see this video. I'll watch it at night. I've already seen part of it. Nice work. Keep on it. Thanks. Magnum Man 008 says, when did Seiko start using the 8L35B? And I said, I'm not sure. Google would probably tell you. I'm sure someone in the comments probably knows as well. Cyber Rabbit says, completely unremarkable. It's what the movement is. So it's comparable to the 52 and 56 series from years ago, which were unremarkable as a nice enough movement, but there's no special finish, no special technology on them or anything. They're just a good solid movement with a workman style finish on them. He said the timekeeping technology came from aliens. You be the judge. Did it? Maybe if I watched Ancient Aliens, I'd know the answer. Super Cruise says, very interesting construction, Adrian, but as you said, nothing special. Seems pretty straightforward. That's all I'm trying to say. I said, yep, that's it. It's nice. It's in a good package. There's nothing mythical. Timekeeping's pretty good. Just is what it is. Mr. Pips Popper SUV says, I was going to buy the Seiko SLA 051 Willard, but now I'm not so sure. I don't like the idea of sending it back to Seiko for service. Is this movement better than the ETA 2824 movement? And yeah, that's the question you have to ask yourself. And one of the things that came up during the right to repair inquiry here is that not everyone knows that these have to go back to Japan for service. So you're buying this watch in good faith, thinking that you can go to your average watchmaker and just say, look, can you service this after the 5 to 7 year mark or whatever? And most of them are just going to have to say no, because if you're pulling this thing apart and you break anything, you can't get parts for it. And that's one of the things with doing watch repair. Anytime you pull a watch apart, the chance that you'll break something is not insignificant. So if you break something or you drop it on the floor or something and it's gone forever, how the hell do you get the replacement part? Well, you just don't. So as for being better than the ETA 2824 movement, it's really difficult to compare because the ETA 2824 is what, 70 years old now. It's a very old movement, and I mean, even then it wasn't sort of freshly designed from the beginning back then. So it was designed from other derivatives. So you could argue that it's even older than 70 years old. But sorry, just one sec. I've just got to deal with this phone. Right, done. So you could argue that technically the foundations of the 2824 are even older than 75 years. So, well, 70 years, sorry, because they were designed back in the 50s. So it's got a different approach to the same problem. But the difference is with 2824 is you can get parts for it. So that you could argue that makes it a better value proposition. So Bobby Woo's responded to that. Yes, this movement is in every shape or form better than the ETA design. And yeah, I mean, we can say that. I mean, it's a much newer design. So the original ETA movement would have been designed pen and paper on a big drafting board and all sorts of stuff, whereas the 8L series would have been designed by computer. They also use hardened components for this movement with Lossier inner curve hairspring, which is only found on vintage Patek. Right, I'm not sure what to say there. The Swiss abandoned 600 plus Vickers component to reduce production cost on the newer movements. The 8L 9S family of movements are generally considered to be equal to Rolex caliber. Like I said, this comes back to, again, the argument of free sprung versus flat balances. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not quite sure on the Lossier inner curve. It may be the case. So, yeah, I've got no real comment on there. Someone that's into engineering could explain it better. Jeff Liang says, how does this movement compare to ETA movement? We've answered that like 4 times already. So all you have to do is read the comments there. Timmerson responded again, nothing special video, but very special watch movement I see. If that's your opinion, then great. Again, I just said not really. It's overpriced for what it is. I mean, it's got a worse finish than a high-end 2824. You can pick up those watches all day long for about $1,000. Add to that, you can actually get parts for it. Seiko don't supply parts to the 8L series, which I said like 85 times there. I guess I just have to keep saying it so people get the message that, you know, it's factors in your value proposition. Koenig says, can you service the SLA 021? I'm in Melbourne. I said, no problem as long as it's not broken. Jim Ruin says, cool, thumbs up. Fan Japan Issue Music says, magic finger, that's what she needs. I won't go into that. SS says, nothing special is that all. And I said, yep, a movement priced in the mid-range that competes with an Elabor. I'm probably saying that incorrectly. ETA 24, excuse me, competes with Elabor ETA 2824s. You can actually get parts for that routinely sell for half the prices of the watches that this movement, as in ones with the 8L series, do sell for now. Overpriced for what it is, but an unfinished movement that can't be fixed locally and is to be sent for Japan for repair. Ultimately, poor value for money. And you'll note that in my criticism of this movement, it all comes down to value for money. I mean, I'm not ever questioning the performance of it. You know, the performance is good for what you pay, but it all comes down to the value proposition. I mean, these watches go for thousands, and these bastards won't even sell you parts or let people, independent repairers, service it. And I mean, I have to stop repeating that, but that's my only major criticism of this movement, that it's poor value for money. Never used to be, but again, the parts issue was still an issue back then as well. So Wayley 6112 says, in short, nothing special at all. Wonder if any movement is special at all. And I said, definitely. And again, I'm of the opinion that there's a nexus between finish and price. So nexus means there's a sort of a crossover point. With the current Seiko price rise, I think these fall below in that Nexus, which is what I've been saying, which is why I'm of the opinion that they're overpriced for what they are in comparison to, say, an Elabor ETA 2824, which you could actually get get parts for. So just the same message over again. It's just a value for money proposition, and that's where I think the 8L series falls down. You can't fix them. Well, you can't get them fixed by people that you want to fix them. You break something, you can't get parts for it. Seiko do sell some of the case parts, but movement parts, you're shit out of luck, and that's my problem with them. All right, so we're up to 50 minutes now, so I think that's a pretty good run. And you've seen me on camera, and like I said, in this case, it's added about 20 pounds. All right, so I'm going to try and get some more tech videos done in the new year. I've had a pretty full-on year this year and just have not really had time to do videos, and also been a little bit behind work-wise for most of the year, which is just I'm turning the corner with that now. Trying to get it back down to a reasonable turnaround time, and I'm nearly there. So I sort of see it a little bit disrespectful to be goofing around making videos on YouTube when I should be fixing people's watches. So that has factored in as well. And yeah, I've really had my hands full for the most part of this year. But coming into the new year, I've got some new stuff happening. So I'll just so we've got these, not the watch, but the glass. So there we go. So that's a pre-production evaluation part for the crystals for the 6139. So we've got those. We've also got the KS buckles, which you'll see on Instagram. So I've got pre-production samples turning up in a few days, and hopefully they're just excellent and we can go forward. We'll see how we go. Also seals, I've put out some more seals in the past 2 months. So we've now got crystal seals for the 6105 and 6309 and any of the others that use the 32mm crystal. I am doing the 3320 W10s now in sapphire. And I've got some other seals on the go as well. So probably next year I'll do a bit of a product launch type video and go through some of the stuff that's come in recently, and just get it back into the fold with doing some promotion. All right, so we'll leave that there. So that's my responses to the 8L35 video. So yeah, feel free to say something nasty, call me an idiot, or alternatively say, okay, yep, that makes total sense from a value proposition. It's all fucked up, or try and tell me where I'm wrong. In fact, I welcome that. I love hearing a different opinion. Someone come on and tell me why I'm wrong about the value proposition on the 8L35. Just go for it. We'll leave it there, and thanks for the people that sat through it, and I hope it was informative. And yeah, I mean, Grand Seiko is the same deal as well. No parts, so you have to send it back to Seiko for service. I can't fix it for you. Just a shit value proposition, really. Maybe something will change in Australia, or with the high-profile Cousins case, to get the right to repair laws in, and something might change. Who knows? Fingers crossed. We'll see how it goes, but that's my take on it. Vintage stuff, no problem. The parts are out there, but it's just these modern movements that they haven't released parts or tech info for. All right, so we'll leave that there, and thanks for anyone that sat through it. And like I said, please come on, tell me I'm wrong, give me a different perspective, or tell me you can see the point that I'm making. tell me you can see my point, but I'm still wrong. Thanks for watching. See you again.